Wait, do you guys want some water?
We're already in the show. Fonzie, too late. We're rolling.
Customer service.
What a host.
Customer service.
Think of your podcast as a stage and you have an event space. Think about who you want to serve. Use it as a stage to create leverage around the people that you want to meet that will add validation to what you already believe, the people that you're trying to serve that you want to add value to from that stage, and that content as how you can share that with people without just being a one-to-one scenario.
One of the first things that I always ask with CEOs that I work with, what do you want the business to do for you? Right? Because we're going to pour our heart and soul into the business. What do you want the podcast to do for you?
I had something that really bothered me happen the other day, or like, I won't say bothered me, it stuck with me. And somebody was talking to me about their show, and I listened to it before I got on the call with them. It's a really good show. And they're just like, it's just not growing. What do I do? I'm like, well, you need to get out there and do this. And finally the person just stopped me and goes, Alex, I'm not a marketing person. I just like to interview interesting people and talk to them. He goes, is there a way someone else can do that?
We've got some
Hey,
fresh new
I'm
young
Luis.
talent
And
doing some
I'm
things that I
Luis.
know you haven't
And you're
heard
listening to the
before.
Content is Profit podcast. Anyways, welcome back to Content is Profit Special Edition Podcasting Town Hall with some special guests here today. Studio clap, everybody. There we go, studio clap.
Wait, do you guys want some water? Do you guys want some water?
I mean, I have my water. I'm like pro level.
We're already in the show. Fonzie, too late. We're rolling.
Customer service.
What a host. What a
Customer
host.
service.
So, a little backstory. Obviously, we'll share a little bit of how we met, but all three of these studs have been in the show before.
Alpha males.
Alpha males. Pablo is actually the first official guest of Content is Profit ever.
Let's go.
Jerry, we met a long time ago, and also incredible consultant, advisor, friend, mentor, all of the things, father figure,
It's my age, isn't it?
And
I'm just saying, but you're the only one with white hair in here, so yeah.
Alex is starting to lose his hair, though.
That started at like 25, so it's in 10 years in the making
It's
thus
holding.
far.
It's
So,
holding.
it is.
Yeah. And Alex over there, we went to our first podcasting conference, and we saw him speak, and we're like, we need to meet that stud. And we met him at the bar, and he's like, I'm actually from your city. And then we connected, and turns out that he's a god in the podcasting world. Just saying, just that.
I don't know if I want to take that. But all right.
So we're gonna leave
More
obviously,
than a man, for sure.
More than a man.
man.
So if you want to find out more, all the links are gonna be right below. Just click on them, and you're gonna find out more about them. And then obviously Fonzie here, official co-host of Content is Profit and mastermind behind everything. So we thought about meeting.
I did find the splitters, for the mics. So.
You did find the splitters.
I'm only here because of Fonzie, by the way. So,
But anyway, so we
Somebody picked a bro.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Oh, we'll have that at the end. We'll definitely bring Pick a Bro back to the end of this episode.
Yes, please.
So it turns out after the big decision of coming and recording here in Studio Podcast Suites, and that we now proudly own. Let's go.
Let's go.
For that.
Let's go. Huge
We're
acquisition.
why don't we do like a podcasting, town hall type of episode? And 8 weeks later, we're here.
Months later, wow.
State of the Union.
But anyway, so Pablo,
Yeah.
what do we want to talk about today?
I feel like Pablo is the MC,
Am I?
Yeah.
real quick, I got to say this in Pablo's defense. We, right before hitting record, we're like, oh, Pablo, you kind of know where we want to go, right? And you're like, huh? And then you started, and now you're like, go ahead, Pablo, what are we doing? And we're like, hey, everybody.
Well, before the episode, he was like, I think we should take this in here and here. I was like, that's a great idea. And he's usually an MC, He's great at guiding
Here's what
conversations.
we'll do. We'll do a 2-minute introduction of each one of you, and then after that, we'll go straight into content, right? A little bit of like, why are we here? How are we involved in the industry? And then we'll go tackle the topic. So, Alex, why don't you start?
2 minutes is going to be tough for me, just so you know.
Then 1 minute.
I was thinking 8 minutes.
18.
Yeah, so Alex Sanfilippo, I am the founder of podpros.com, which is a company that, thank you very much, appreciate it, thank you. A company that focuses on offering software solutions for independent podcast hosts and their guests. Our most popular service is Podmatch, which is literally like a dating app, but connects podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. And for me, I just focus on being an educator in the space. So for me, it's just helping educate the next generation of podcasters, which I think are really doing a great job serving the world. Like, this is my favorite form of media, and I love seeing that just get accelerated and grow.
Sweet. Yeah, studio clap again.
Good job.
Alex was the first guy to be famous off of podcasting in this table, for sure.
Absolutely.
For the record. My name is Pablo Gonzalez, founder of Be The Stage. I have been obsessed with relationships my whole life and scaling relationships through community and how all that works. Content creation is the new golf. It is the new way to create relationships that last, and it's way more useful. So it brought me to the podcast medium. And if you're going to focus on building a company through relationship building, then you need to be evangelizing a problem. You need to be evangelizing this way of helping a certain type of people and have them feel like you understand them. They need to feel understood. Podcasting is a great medium. So focusing on a problem, focusing on evangelizing it, using content to do it, to me is the modern go-to-market strategy. And I'm a huge fan of every one of these guys in here. Just a really, really big fan. I think the idea of having acquired these podcast suites, I want to talk about it because I think the future of commercial real estate runs right through the spaces that are used to solve problems. And one of the big problems that we're going to have is how do we create content for businesses in a consistent basis. So this idea of the shared economy of podcast suites for content creation, I think it's brilliant. I'm super proud of you guys for doing it. I'm pumped to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ooh. So,
Jerry Mack.
Pressure's on.
but I mean, I'm the midget at the table. So Jerry McNamara, I'm the founder of Proven Chaos. Over the course of my career, I've been super lucky to run 5 businesses, 5 different industries, B2B, B2C, sold products and services. And I believe in podcasting because I think it's the greatest opportunity in a low-cost way to connect with your clients, your consumers, to evangelize your problem, to borrow Pablo's words there. And I think if you're in business today, you should have a podcast. It gives you an opportunity to have thought leadership, to bounce ideas, to build relationships. And for me, I've been running my own show, Best Places to Lead, for the last 16, 18 months. And woo!
It's a good show, man. It's a good show.
And so, the point of that is it's a great opportunity for me to speak with other award-winning leaders who have done amazing things and to share the ideas of how do we get forward better, because we're always better together. And so my mission is to positively impact 5 million people over the next 4 years through better business, because I've never had anyone show up to work and say, I really want to suck today. And yet there are plenty of people that are ineffective. And so I'm trying to scale the knowledge and the lessons learned that people have had in running and growing their own businesses. So that's what I'm doing.
Sweet. That's pretty good, guys. Pretty good.
So,
10 out of 10.
Some pre-podcast conversation, right, you guys? Some of us are like super huge believers in the industry, right, going up. Some others, I heard some comments, right, not gonna point fingers, but they're like, maybe, I don't know, like the podcast as an industry, it might be going down. I don't know. It might be overpopulated. I don't know. Obviously, we all know the power of creating content and building their relationships through that content. Podcasting is a platform that makes that very, very easy. But I'm interested of like, what's your view in the industry on itself?
Can I just start with, this is something that I've learned. When you have experience in something, it's easy to you. And the reality of it is, if you've never done this before, it's super intimidating. And so when I advise businesses, what's simple to me, people have never seen before. And so I have to give you guys a lot of credit because you've, blazed the path in front of other people to give them opportunities to be successful, but don't diminish the fact that this is hard. What you guys do is hard, and doing it well is even harder. And so I caution you to say like, oh, it's super simple. Yes, once you learn it, but at the outset, I think it's intimidating. It's the imposter syndrome. What will I have to say that someone might resonate with? And I want us to be careful, because I do think it's the greatest platform in today's environment to grow your business, to connect with your audience. And you can do it cost effectively. You don't have to buy media. You can if you want to accelerate your show. But I caution that because it's something that I run into a lot. Like, oh, running a business is really simple. No, it isn't. Not for people who haven't done it well before.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
I'm interested in Alex. Alex, you were saying some stuff earlier. I think you as a guy that has a SaaS platform that serves thousands of podcasters, I think you have a really wide breadth of understanding of what's going on in the industry. You want to kind of like share what you're hearing right now in the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. First off, like to me, like looking at industry health as a whole, when I think about that, the very first thing I look at is just what is the one metric that matters? And to me, that's listenership. And if listenership is growing, I think it can be a very healthy industry. Now, are healthy things happening below that metric? I say no. And I'll talk about that in a second here. But just in general, like, is it a good time for podcasting? Yes, because more people than ever are listening. And it's getting referenced in a lot of movies now. Like, it's not like at first, the first time I heard podcasting mentioned in a movie or like it was a TV show, maybe it was like, what? Podcasting on TV? Right? Yeah. And now people are like, oh yeah, I found about this podcast through like a TV show. They talked about it. I'm like, okay, this is just now common placement, right?
Yeah. So it's become part of the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great way to say it. And I mean, seeing that happen, that's a great thing. So I think the industry's healthy from that standpoint. Sure. But I do see that attracting the wrong type of people to podcasting. And because of that, I'm very concerned about its future health from a content perspective. So not like, will it work? It'll work, but who's getting into it is the problem. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the first thing I think of is just like when you see the opportunity, we have more people than ever trying to be guests. So like hosts, yeah, they're still starting, but like if you go back, I looked at the numbers this morning because I wanted to be ready for this. There are under 400,000 active shows still. And last time there was more than that was, I think it was July 2020. And at this point we're recording this, that's years ago. So if there's actually, that was the last time there was anything more than there is now. It's just consistently stayed around 400,000. And right now it's below that as we're recording this. And so it's like, man, people are not sticking with it, but people are joining as a guest because they're like, same opportunity, right? I get to create content, but I don't have to do what these two guys do, right? Like these two guys, the biz bros are gonna be like crushing it, like they're gonna do all the work, right? And so people are seeing that. And the problem I'm seeing is the small indie podcaster who's doing all the work, putting the effort in, is saying, how do I grow and monetize this? Because there's more listeners than ever, but I'm not getting them. And two, how do I make money with this? And unfortunately, I was telling Pablo this offline before we started, but a lot of the I'll just call them like the legacy gurus in podcasting also have no idea how to make money with a podcast, also don't know how to grow one. They just were there at the right time, so it just worked naturally. Yeah. If you're the first person podcasting, then everyone starts talking about it, you're going to be famous, right? It's just how it goes. Yeah. So they tell people, here's 2 ways to grow your show and monetize your show. Sorry. Number 1, have on really big guests, and they will share it, and it'll grow your show, which we've all know that does not actually, maybe it gives you a small spike at first, but that doesn't really work like at all. The number 2 thing they say is if they're not really big and don't have a massive following or not going to grow your show, charge them to be on it so you can monetize your show that way. And my big problem with that is you immediately turn a meaningful experience, a relationship, a connection into a transaction. And as soon as it turns into that, the whole dynamic of the interview is different. Yeah. The whole process is different. And really, like, you're missing the big opportunity. Like, if you really want to monetize, don't charge your guest. Turn them into a client later, right? That's like the real secret behind it. But so that being the wrong education, that I feel like I'm fighting that education that the industry is just starting to really buy into, and I am losing that battle really bad right now.
I mean, we see it right every day with the people that are coming into the physical studio here. It's like they see it as a vehicle to maybe grow their business faster than ever, right? It's a new opportunity. Maybe their reference on content might be coming from somebody that has been in the industry for 10 years, right? Publishing consistently or some other type of video content. And it's like,
which happened to all of us, right? I wanted my first show to be the Lewis House show immediately, right? Like, but it wasn't. But yeah, continue.
I wanted that better. Too.
It was way better, right? Yeah. And I think what you're doing, Alex, and everybody here too, is like the education around the industry, right? It's like, is this a long-term play? Are we painting the picture for the business owner that wants to start a platform like this, right? I remember having a conversation with Greg, the first client that we worked together, and it was like his pain was like, I just need a consistent way to do this long-term and build relationships long-term. It's like, that is the perfect vehicle, to the point that now you guys have an in-house studio, right? And you guys do all the production in-house. It's amazing. So I think it's like doing an internal audit, like, why are you starting a podcast, right? Why do you want to start a platform? And being very honest, right? For us, we've been very honest from the very beginning. It was a Hail Mary movement when we what do you call it in English?
It's a pass.
Hail Mary pass.
You should stick to soccer references.
I'm just gonna be like,
stick to soccer
94th minute Messi freaking
there you
goal.
Go. There it is.
There you go.
That's better.
Put it in there. Okay, that's way better. But we had no idea how to do that, and we just ran into somebody that came into the show. Be like, what do you guys do? And we're like, oh, we do X. I'm like, I need you guys. I'm like, perfect, right? And we were very lucky because he was after 20 episodes, and that just fueled the experience, right?
Yeah, I think you touched a very important point in here, which is, not many people stick into the podcast. Audience growing, but then they're not getting those audiences. And I'm guessing, somebody that has a small size podcast might be asking themselves, so how do I start growing my listenership? Let's say they might not have a big budget to do it, right? And I want to pre-frame this with a conversation that we had with our last guest, Gary Henderson. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. Have you heard of him by any chance? No? Cool, bald guy. He's developing awesome community. Actually, would be
Alex in 10 years.
Alex in 10 years. He would actually be
up.
a great connection for you guys. Especially, he's developing this community in Web3, which is super cool. But he was talking. I literally spend 20% of my time creating content and 80% just promoting that content. Right? He goes into all the other platforms and talks about the content that he just created. Right, and I think a lot of creators don't have that mindset, right? A lot of people that come into the space, they just go, "Oh, I'm gonna publish it. I'm gonna hit publish, and everybody's gonna be able to listen to it, right?" Yeah. And they feel like they already put in the work when they're probably not even halfway there. And that's something that I felt we've experienced on our end, right? But I'm curious to see what are your point of views on that, because I know you promote it. I know you promote your content, right? And I know you do as well. And you actually started to being super intentional now in social media. So I'm curious to see what have you seen, especially with, having this view over so many podcasters.
Real quick, can I add to this question a little bit here? Because I had something that really bothered me happen the other day. Or I won't say bothered me. It stuck with me. And somebody was talking to me about their show, and they've done I listened to it before I got on the call with them. It's a really good show. And the other's it's just not growing. What do I do? I'm like, well, you need to get out there and do this. And finally the person just stopped me and goes, Alex, I'm not a marketing person. I just like to interview interesting people and talk to them. He goes, is there a way someone else can do that? And I was like, huh. I'm like, because if you're going to be a really good interviewer and podcaster, does that mean you also have to be a really good marketer? I didn't know what to say. I don't know. I'm going to pass that one off.
I think I always come back to it's the high achievers trap. We always think we have to do all the doing. And the reality of it is you have to resource the job to be done. And so if marketing is not your thing, then you have to find someone to do that for you and be great in the lane that you want to be great in. If you want to be a podcast host and that's what sets your soul on fire, go do that. But if you want to grow your show, then you need to go hire a marketing firm to help you do that. I'll give you an example, and I think this is really interesting, Pablo, and I have this conversation about my show. And, if I'm being frank, there hasn't gotten great traction. But my view, what do I want the show to do for me? It's so long-term. I'm playing the infinite game that I'm okay with. I don't even know how many downloads that I have because I don't ask. Because that's not the purpose of why I'm doing it. Sure, would I love for it to have more traction and to grow faster? Absolutely. But I'm learning so much. I'm stopping every week to speak with an award-winning CEO and to learn from them. And I get to test and vet the frameworks and theories that I'm building to impact all of the businesses that I'm trying to impact. So it's working for me. It may not be working as a podcast show and the impact that it can. But I also find in business, and you guys, I'm sure have seen this too, where people stop just short.
Oh yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. What is the difference between persistence and stupidity? Of he almost broke through but stopped. And I think to your point, July 2020 is the highest apex of the number of active shows. There's a lot of shows starting and a lot of shows closing. And I just wonder, could they have found an audience? And for me, there's joy in doing the show and learning and speaking to other people that even if it takes way longer than I thought it would, I'm okay with it.
I love that. Consistency wins. It really does. Pablo, going back to the original question, Pablo, you were telling me about your latest show and how, not that it's growing. You're a marketer. You do really well at that. So does the team, I'm sure. But it has potential to grow organically because of the type of show it is. You can explain.
Yeah, I'll jump into that. I can talk about audience growth, but I categorically reject the need for audience growth, right? when you and I speak, you're like, you're a podcast guy, but you're like a podcast guy as as a tool, right? Like I don't really see a podcast as its value being its audience. Like I said, content creation is the new golf, right? With scalable externalities towards it, and that's what my talk at podcast movement's about, right? Like you guys were there, like with the Natural Average Investor show, with about 100 downloads an episode. Year one made $40 million in revenue as a channel, and when we reverse engineered and looked back at everything that worked to us, what we realized was that it was about 30 people. It was about 30 people that were responsible for the majority of that revenue coming in because of a couple of different things, right? Because if you can leverage people and relationships the right way, then you don't need a giant listenership, right? So the podcast can be a source of social validation and connections and have less than 100 downloads and still be a viable business strategy. But it has to be purposeful, which is kind of what we're all talking about, right? So like if you are tying, you need to understand what your back-end monetization is. The whole thing that you said of the high achievers trap, I think, is one business problem. On the other side of it is the idea that creatives just have this problem, right? Like it is no different than the artist that's like, I just want to paint and somebody sell my shit. And it's like, yeah, cool, you can do that, but then somebody's going to tell you what to paint.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So that's the give and take when it comes to just wanting to be a podcaster versus this thing being a business tool. Yeah. Right? So a couple of different things within that is small audience podcasting, right? The thing that's moved the needle for us is taking really into account kind of like 4 different things that you use in your business development strategies. One is how you can create a lead magnet, right? Like a content magnet of sorts. How are you compiling the same conversation with multiple people so that you at some point have this proprietary data that you can put all together and be like, oh, you want to hear the 100 opinions of car buyers, of podcast studio needers, of, CEOs that have the same pain point, of podcasters that, like how to get better guests or whatever, right? Like that's one thing that you can compile over time. The other thing you can compile over time, and like you can do it episode by episode, is what we call content darts, right? And it's just this idea of the old marketing department was, hey, I got to go talk to this buyer. Make me a brochure about this, marketing monkey. And at the end of the day, that's like a whole like thing that you got to design. But in a podcast conversation, you can do that in one conversation. Yeah. You can be like, oh, okay, you want a brochure on how our stuff fits? Let me get the expert on how relationships build into business over time. Have a conversation with them. Have it validate what we do. Send it as advice to somebody, right? Like that's the small ball of it all. Yeah. And it's just all about understanding what you want to have in an outcome and what it's going to create and what the inputs are needed to do that. And if you start doing that, right, like our big intentional shift became taking every single episode, understanding what the overall outcome lesson that the guest is going to teach, how that relates to our audience, and then going through that episode and not just taking those 2 things out, but understanding, oh, this person in this episode said they also have this pain point, and we had a past episode that somebody talked about that pain point, so let's get them that clip and send it to them. Yeah. This person in this episode said clearly designed an expertise around this, so I'm gonna mark them in my network, right? Like in my list of contacts as if I'm ever going to produce a class on how to do like small events for business, then I'm going to use this person that was on the Event Marketing Redefined podcast to co-teach it and have an event around it, right? So it's really no different in the small ball sense of like building a network, utilizing your network, leveraging relationships, doing co-creation on the small end. And then we can talk about audience later, but to me, that's before I talk for too long. I just wanted to talk about that idea.
That's gold.
Help me unpack, right? Because I think I'm on episode 70. Mm-hmm. How are you keeping track? What's the taxonomy? You're using a platform to keep track of? Is it a CRM that you're saying, oh, here was the genius that came out of this episode, and you're using some way to track that? Because, I don't know, I'm 48. I forget shit.
Yeah.
And so
Pablo's brain. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't own a phone or a computer or anything. He just
knows how to use a credit card, though.
Yeah. Listen, man, there is probably, in my podcast and the Untitled Chapter show, we've done over 200 episodes, and there's like probably about like 180 where that stuff is not tracked. Going forward, it looks like I have a team. When I'm doing this stuff, we have an Airtable and stuff is organized. We have these different content pillars. Right now with ChatGPT, it's easy to put something in and say, give me like the main takeaways of this thing or what are the subjects of this thing, and those go in as tags in Airtable, right? So you can search for that stuff. Also, in a very manual sense, my right hand Brian, I'm like, hey Brian, you're keeping a list of, right, like for each client, right, for my Finance for Physicians, for Event Marketing Redefined. Like I know with Event Marketing Redefined, I want to eventually teach a course on the modern event marketer strategies, right? So I'm like, every guest that comes on, I'm like, when we teach a course, this is what I would want them to teach. We just have a running list on that person. And per person, we also have a running list of like, on that episode, they said that they needed help with this, right? So we're just cross-matching that stuff pretty manually, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a team, how do you do that, right? Because I mean, coming back to your point, Alex, I mean, people are starting shows. They don't get past 10 episodes. They're probably solo producers producing their own show.
Yeah. Jerry, when you started your business, you were how did you organize the people that you met and the people that you introduced to each other? Like, how does the insurance broker that's out there trying to get the business organized? However you want to organize it.
Jerry had one of those
Like-
big albums with, with the business cards in there.
Pictures remind me.
Yes.
Polaroids.
Some people have a planner. Other people have HubSpot super integrated into what they
I
do.
just didn't know if you had a system that you could share that.
It's a mix of
Airtable.
both, man. It's a little bit of everything, man. But but you're right. My brain does work that way. Like I am always looking for that.
So here's an example, right? When we started Continuous Profit, after episode 20, it was only solo episodes, and then we started tracking simple spreadsheets, like name of the guest, what do they do, name of the episode. That evolved into, we were using Monday.com at the time, so we asked these questions to every guest. Let's put it on a form so they can answer it, so that goes directly into Monday.com, and each guest had its line, and then that's a database that you can export. Then it evolved into, we work now with Notion. And I remember it's like, what's the best project management tool? It's the one that you use.
You're a Notion beast.
I love Notion.
You're
I'm
a beast.
obsessed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm using right now too, and I think that's the point that you're saying there. It's like there is no silver bullet.
Correct.
It's what works for you. Because I'll be real, I tried some of these other tools, like really big tools that everyone was suggesting, and it made zero sense to me. I couldn't keep up with it.
Here's the evolution, right? Like from Notion it was coming more on the production eye, where it's like, hey, episode comes in, this is the information of the guest, it has to be produced X way, the way that it looks, the way that it feels, what are the show notes, right? But then when we saw the opportunity, hey, this might be a business opportunity, then what happens, like we just connected that with a CRM. We use Go High Level at the moment, right? So they both mirror like the same flow, but one is production specific, the other one's sales specific. You have, your points of contact. Do I send an email after? Do I give them a call? Do I send them a text? But this came after executing. And I think, that's the friction for a lot of people is like when we're starting a platform like this, especially the concept that we're talking about today, it can seem very complex from the very beginning. So it's like what I will probably recommend to people is like step back and maybe look at these 6 phases, right? The number one is like, what do we actually talk about on the show? We actually have to talk about something, right? So if it's not you as like the main person, lean on the topic of the other person and have a conversation about that. Stage 2 is like, how do we create this together, right? Well, the simple way that everybody knows is you can jump on a Zoom call and record that Zoom call, and that can become your episode. Then there's like you can level up the production after that, but that's the simple way. We've actually had our older brother do it over Instagram Live, which was like crazy and amazing at the same time. So we created together, perfect. Now, how do we produce it? You can go very low friction, which is like you grab that same recording and you put it out as is, right? And then you can level up. You can put an intro music, clean up the audio. There's many levels to that. After that, it's like, how do we distribute? Distribution and promotion, right? We talked about the 20/80 rule. We talk about how do we actually market this? Do we hire somebody that knows how to do the thing? So this is how we like to like compartmentalize like these elements. And after that, it's like, well, how are we monetizing the show in a sense? Obviously, it has to be a return, whether that's like a personal return for, I really enjoy having this conversation, so I'm willing to actually put in this X amount of dollars as an investment. For us, that was our goal, was like, well, I think we can monetize somehow. We don't know how, but right now we're enjoying these conversations, and that for us is a really good return. I think one of the early titles was like, how to get $100,000 worth of advice for free, right? And you're like, well, that's crazy, because we had conversations with all of you guys. We had conversations with people that we admire, mentors, that people that we wanted to connect with, right? And then after that, it's like, how do I actually run the show? So we call it podcast flow. That's like our own internal term. But is it your CRM? Is it your production? Right? Those two lines. And I hope that gives a blueprint on how do you kind of categorize the things, and you can up the level of each one of them individually, or you can hire people in each of those stages to then continue to grow your platform.
You know, the
Beautiful,
crazy
bro.
thing is that they got $100,000 of advice from Jerry, and they got nothing from you and me. So I don't know, man.
Yeah. By the way, pulling the goalie on the last minute penalty kick, that would be the Hail Mary for soccer.
Pulling the what?
Pulling the goalie on a last minute penalty kick is
What
like
is-
the equivalent of a last
What
minute.
is pulling the goalie?
Like when you bring your goalie up.
Did you know
to
soccer?
score.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Corner kick, maybe.
And him scoring.
Oh
the
yeah,
goal.
not penalty kick, corner kick.
Yeah,
is what I
yeah,
meant.
that's how I was
no.
confused. I was like,
Last minute corner kick. Yeah.
You pull the goalie in hockey.
And
put
in,
a 6-man
and in
on
birth
that.
control.
Does anyone here know anything about sports? I'm just wondering. I don't.
It was just
So
no-
this all sounds good to me.
I just pretend.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I think you sent me this clip yesterday. This guy's talking on a podcast
Yeah.
about Messi's first game.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he scored the last minute winner
Beautiful.
off of a free kick.
Yeah.
And they're talking on the podcast, and I hope it's a parody. If it's a parody, it's great because they got a lot of views. But the guys are talking like, yeah, he scored a last minute penalty, from outside the box. And then he's also going to be made captain of the MLS, and people like, what? Like all the comments are like, these guys don't know soccer, but
Engagement through the roof.
But they got so much engagement, and then there was one comment actually saying like, oh no, these guys actually know soccer. This is a full on parody. They're just talking about it, joking about it. And I was like, this is genius. They're getting so much engagement. I can imagine how many people are actually clicking, on their profile and checking them out and stuff like that, which, again, obviously we're more on the business side of things. But I was like, that's a cool strategy to drag some people, get those little spikes. And maybe a small percentage of those spikes might be a little retainer, right? And you see those strategies kind of like along the way. Some other guy actually puts, like purposeful mistakes inside his edits. Like text, for example. He's like, this is what I do from Monday to Friday. And then when he's naming the day of the week, he's like, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday. And then you hear all the comments like, does this dude knows that? He makes all this stuff. And he does it on purpose because he gets all that stuff, that traction. Yeah. But the core of the message, right? And this is what we can't forget. The core of the message is valuable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, sure, you can mistake the days of the week, but the core is actually giving the listener a lot of value. Yeah. And in that case, a strategy that they can immediately implement. So there's a few things here and there that, talking about promotion and whatnot, I think is super interesting.
And I think coming back to it, it's like, what is value? Might be just entertainment. Doesn't have to be educational.
100%. Right? Value is subjective, right? Value is in the eyes of the beholder.
Saturday, I was having a conversation with Mario, our older brother, right? I would continue to encourage to learn English so he can join these conversations. But, he's running a business in Colombia, right? And we're talking about the concepts of shows, right? Because he also started a platform based on like what we're talking about today. It didn't monetize how people think it will monetize, but he created a whole business out of it, which is way more incredible. And I was talking to him about an idea that I had that I shared with him. It's like, we have this cousin that is hilarious. It's funny. Every time he talks, we just laugh. And then he has also a friend that it's deep voice and incredible. And we're like, why don't we start a show just for the pure purpose of talking whatever we want to talk about in Spanish, and for pure entertainment, and see what happens, right? Because we've done the business side. And Mario's like, man, there's this show that I tune in every single night, like every week with my girlfriend, and it's this guy that they drink together and they interview famous people while they drink together and they get drunk together, and it's hilarious, right? And it's like, that's the concept of that show.
I mean, that's the concept of Brews and Bros, the very first podcast we tried to launch.
Yeah, thank God that did not happen. Three times a week drinking, that would be crazy.
That'd be rough.
But it brings into the table, like, what is the type of show that you want, right? That's gonna obviously attract a bigger audience on the front end, right? But we also talk a lot about the audience on the back end with the relationships that you can build, right? So if you are a business, do you start a show based on for that, or do you align with already creators that are doing that type of stuff? Like, for example, this specific show, they align with brands that rum brands, whiskey brands, because that's the concept of their show, right? So they don't have specific topic, but they align with that. So there's also different angles on how brands and companies and creators can be in the space together. I think it's super interesting, right?
Yeah. I'm actually curious to ask you guys. I'm thinking about an answer to my question, but I don't want to give it away. But what do you guys think we have in common in this table, besides, being super cool, everybody, but also in the podcasting, and what do we have in potential in common with very successful people in the podcasting industry, and not successful just measured by a big audience, right? But successful measured by them actually staying long-term in the game, and, success measured maybe by their own KPIs, right? It could be their business growing with a small audience, like Pablo was saying, right? Or maybe some of those, it is the size of the audience. What is that commonality?
I don't know, bro.
You don't know?
I'll jump in. Actually, real quick, if I could jump back to one thing real quick about this whole audience growth idea. I'm going to share my favorite growth hack that goes well for anybody. Like, what my team does is we listen to our past episodes. We pick like our cornerstone ones. Some of them, we all know, like not every episode is a total slam dunk, right? It can be good. Yeah. Someone who likes the show will love it, but maybe it's not the one you want to use as the introduction to your show, right? Mm-hmm. There's a few episodes here and there that happen that are those episodes. Mm-hmm. What we do is we build out really what the core of what it offers somebody, and then what that person might be struggling with. So we identify two things. What does it deliver on, and what is the struggle that someone would say they want this deliverable? And then what we do is we just go through social media and we search for that type of thing. We use Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of it, right? And we find somebody asking about that problem, and we join a conversation with them, even if it's just in comments. We join the conversation. We don't link spam. We join the conversation. And if it opens up, we say, you know what? I did an episode. We won't say we. Say, I did an episode about this exact topic with somebody I thought you might really might be interested in. If you check this out, even skip to a minute, check it out, right? Mm-hmm. We build these we use text expander. We build automatic responses. Our goal is to get one new listener every day. Because if you look at the data in podcasting on average, right now it's about 410 people listening per episode in the first 30 days. Maybe it's the first 7 days, whatever it is. It's something along those lines. Regardless, that puts in the top 10% of all podcasts. So I'm like, if you do this for 410 days straight, you now have a top 10% largest podcast in the world.
Yeah.
And just make that a regular practice, right? Like, find your ideal listener that way. I know this wasn't your question.
No, but I think that's
genius.
a great, great hack.
So behind what you're saying, Alex, is understanding your audience, having an actual niche that you own, right? Like you're talking about podcasters, I would assume, right? Like, and podcasters.
For me, it is, yes.
For you, right? So like you have
Inception, podcasting about podcasting for podcasters.
Which is great, right? Like, and it's easy to throw your hands up and be like, well, that's easy. Just like marketing for marketers is easy, but it's not, right? Because podcasters understand when you're full of crap or not, right? So like behind what you're saying is a strategy of, you know who you serve and the problems that they have, and you are making content that solves for those problems, which to me is, at the end of the day, the numbers that you gave, right? There's a growing demand for podcasting and a constant supply if the numbers of shows aren't going up, right? Now, two things can happen, right? Like these new shows can start to take some market share, or what generally happens in markets is that the category king ends up just like with the majority of the category dynamics, and therefore the big shows are just going to continue to get bigger. How do you break in? Like how do you drive a wedge and carve out your own kind of like set of listeners? You need to. We just talked about it. We're all podcast super consumers. We listen to a ton of podcasts. For me to start making a ritual of a new podcast getting into my rotation, it has to solve a problem for me. Like for you to displace the Content is Profit podcast, you've got to be more Venezuelan and funny and cool and have better content advice, right? If I'm listening to it all the time, right? So that idea, what you were prompting me before, what's working for me right now is we've recently launched a podcast around category design called Category Thinkers. Category design is a discipline that has been growing steadily for some time. The amount of content made around it is still pretty low. There's probably about like 3 to 5 real podcasts that are consistently putting out content around it all the time. And one is the category king of it, Lockheed's stuff, right? But we're coming in and we're making a podcast that A, is filling a need, right? Like there is there is a dearth of supply for the demand of people wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And B, we have a defensible premise of why you need to listen. When you listen to our show, this is how I make some kind of version of this in my intro every single time. While there are a handful of other category design podcasts, they focus on concepts and success stories of category designers. We focus on getting you to be a better category designer. And that is the premise of it, right? So if you're like trying to like get good at this thing, here's a reason for you to listen. So it's a niche down audience that understands what they're there for, and it's a niche down take into that audience. And that, I've been podcasting for 5 years, right? Like a multiple podcasts that have like 100 to like 150 listeners. I've never really broken the 200 listener kind of like consistent threshold yet. This podcast has 7 episodes, and we're already in the realm of like 250 to 300 listeners per episode and growing.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, which is a huge number, right? Like
it's
people
crazy.
don't. Yeah, so yeah, man, that to me.
I said earlier when we were
that's been the
talking,
thing.
results not typical, just so you know.
Correct, but
Big letter with yellow letters.
But
Results not typical.
But wanting those results, if you want audience growth results, you have to be really purposeful about who you're talking to, what you're talking about, why, and most importantly, why the listener should be listening to you. The Pablo Gonzalez, man, I'm funny, I'm cool, I've got cool friends.
Are you funny?
Yes.
He is funny. Look him on.
Bro, he's like the real life Ace Ventura.
Like we're all, it's true. We're all entertaining here and we're all smart and whatever, right? But like just open conversations with interesting people is not going to grow you a big audience, man.
Right.
Like it's just not going to do it.
That's an element that nobody talks about, and it's talent. Are you actually good at delivering the content? And this is a conversation that we had internally with a few of the people that we've served. I'm like, and the people that were scanning the content, like, man, I cannot watch this entire episode. I cannot process this for a client, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so interesting, right? And that brought into the conversation, right? Because if your own team thinks like, hey, this can be leveled up a little bit, what is the audience on the other side? The people listening to you, the people that you send those episodes, that you do the outreach, be like, hey, this might be the episode that you look for. But if you're not entertaining, if you don't provide value, if you're not develop that skill, right? It is a skill that you have to develop. So, Jerry, I'm curious on your side.
He's taking a big breath. He's
Yeah.
He's coming.
Well, I'm just listening, right? And I'm just thinking about business fundamentals. And Pablo has heard me talk about this a lot. You guys have all heard me say this, right? What is the important, painful problem that you solve, and who do you solve it for? And so, while this may be a marketing tactic, it's like a sub-business inside your business to grow your business, right? Very meta, again.
I like it.
But if you don't understand the problem that you solve and why it's important to the people that you're going to solve it for, then you're sunk before you even start. So forget about distribution, forget about production, forget about all those other things. That is the foundational thing that you have to get right. And if you understand that, then you have a fighting chance. I don't care whether it's a podcast. I don't care if it's business.
Yeah.
You have to be in that space first. I mean, we were even talking about, podcast studios. Who's the ideal client inside your studio?
Yeah.
I don't know who it is yet, but you should start having those conversations.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're finding that out too. It
Right.
depends on like how do we want to utilize the physical location?
Right. And so that's why I come back to, my show, maybe from a numbers point of view, isn't as quote unquote successful, but it's serving my needs and the problem that I'm solving for myself. And I'm trying to be a craftsman in growing that into a place where I'm worthy to listen to. I don't think I'm worth listening to yet. Wasn't you talk about like leveling yourself up? I'm still trying to get there. I'm trying to ask better questions. I'm trying to do better research. I'm listening to other podcasts. And so I don't think I've earned the right.
Yeah.
And that's being real and humble to do that. And I think sometimes people think like, oh, well, I recorded the show, they should come. Well, no, are you someone worth, listening to?
Their time, which is the most valuable thing.
Totally.
Also, it's like is your show compared to what show? That's the other thing, right? Like we used to compare ourselves with the top 10 podcasts in the world because those are the ones that have the market space, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, well, like John Lee Dumas says, right? It's like, my show was the best one-person show, interviewing daily interviews, and that's how he categorized. Like, he created his own category of the thing. So he's also compared to, right? In soccer, right? You're not going to compare like a 10-year-old team to a professional team, right? At the end of the day, they've been playing for so many years. They've developed that skill.
And I would argue don't compare yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Comparison's the thief of joy. But the reality of it is you have to find your own voice, your own value, your own audience in doing that. And I hate Me Too businesses. I hate Me Too podcasts. I hate Me Too anythings.
Me too, by the way.
Because, good one. Because at the end of the day, you are ripe for displacement. Because if you could step in on someone else's turf trying to do a better version of them, then someone else is going to do a better version of you. And so you have to find your unique view and point of view to be compelling, to say, yes, come listen to me, come on the journey with me.
That's so interesting. I've said this in the podcast a lot of times. I'm like, the universe puts things in front of me, to have the conversation at the right time, about the right thing. Literally, I'm listening to an audiobook called Company of One. I don't know if anybody has heard it or read it before.
I have missed Fonzie's book recommendations. I've needed this in my life. Continue.
He got a new girlfriend. He's not reading anymore now.
Nice. Still read a lot. That's a lot. You guys saw the book. I'm still reading. I just carried it around to pretend. No, but actually, I was listening to the audiobook, and the chapter that I just read was called Personality Matters, right? And you're talking about this, and you say, I don't have a big audience. Maybe I need to do this. But I remember, when I go into your show, you do the Zoom meetings and all these things and your community, I see a lot of the people that they stay, right? And they stick for a long time. They love not only the personality, but also obviously the value that you're delivering in their lives. When I see Pablo, it's the same thing, right? Like the people that they keep interacting and they keep attracting, like the personality. You, right? Like, it's literally
just you. It doesn't deserve the name.
Alex, my friend.
Me too.
My homie.
Me too.
Yeah, me too over here. Right? Alex, I don't know anybody more passionate about podcasting itself.
That's true.
Than you. And you have a personality around it, right? And people get attracted to it. Which I'm gonna backtrack to my original question.
I wanted you to answer your question.
You guys were like,
for the record, I was gonna go back and have you answer.
Can I guess first?
Yeah.
Okay, because I've been thinking about this question still, and I think that I don't know if this is what you're gonna say, but I'm thinking it is. It's because each of us knows who we serve and how we serve them.
It's along those lines. There's something that adds to that tags to that. What do you think it is? You guys demonstrated it in this conversation plenty of times. Personality, but every time you grab the mic and you talk about category design, you're what?
Passionate.
Yeah, you absolutely love, again, podcasting. You absolutely love category design since you gave me the book. Since you gave me the book. You're like, this is my thing.
Since you gave me the book, bro. Yeah.
And you love best places to lead, right? And literally, you talk about that all day long. And I'm going to be honest, for me personally, of course, I believe content is profit. But for me, I'm not the most passionate about what are the best ways to create content. I'm attracted to that and I'm always researching that. But for me, I'm curiosity.
Yeah.
You're
passionate about learning.
My passion is about learning. And I love bringing people into the podcast. And you can tell my brother, after every episode, I'm like, dude, this was so freaking good, And then we're up next to the next episode, and I'm super excited to have all those conversations, right? I love the curiosity aspect of it. So going back to the question, if people forgot, it was about what is that commonality between, those long-lasting podcasts that have found success. Yes, success being a little bit subjective, right? Because, we're talking about small audiences, some big audiences, but all these people are freaking passionate about the space they're operating in.
Do you guys remember your screw it moment when you're like, I'm going to fully dive into my own personality. I'm going to do this the way that I want to do it, right? I remember very clearly ours. I'm curious. That was a big moment for us where we're like, you know what? We're going to put the blinders on. First 6 months, we're not gonna look at anything that the show is doing except our own relationship and keep it consistent. Do you guys remember that moment?
For me, it was a little later. It was when I hit 100 episodes of my show. It was the first time I did a solo episode, which people had asked me for. So people specifically listening, they're like, we'd like to hear more from you. It's 100 episodes in a row of Alex interviewing people, right? What about you? It was the first time that I was like, my excuse was that's not my format. That's just not what I'm doing. I'm highlighting them. I'm learning from them as well. And finally, I had that moment. I was like, you know what? Fine. 100 episodes. Why not? I'll just go ahead and do one by myself, and it's going to suck, but I'm going to do it anyway. I did it, and still to this date, that was the single most not most popular, most commented on episode I ever had. Wow. So people like reaching out, messages, emails, people that I know in person who I'm like, there's no way they'd ever listen to the show, or like calling me like, dude, that was such a good episode. I'm like, you listen to my show? Right? Like, but yeah, that was that moment. And then like, it's funny because I did that, but my production was weeks ahead. So like when I embraced it, but you didn't hear it till 13 weeks later because I'm organized, right? So 13 weeks later, it's like, okay, that guy's back who was on episode 100. Here he is again. Episode 114, here he is again. But that was my moment. And that took a lot of took a lot of courage. That took more courage than anything else I'd ever done, I'd say.
Yeah.
Personality matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
What about you, Pablo and Jerry?
You want to go first? All right. I haven't.
You nodded yes, and then you all know each other very well.
No, he nodded doubt. My screw it, I'm going to be myself moment happened before I became a podcaster, right? Like for me, it was somewhere around November 2017 where it was like my 15th year in construction. I'm at this conference. I'm debating whether or not I need to take this job in the startup world and pursue something else that I'm actually passionate about, or continue down the path of construction that I've always been on. And somebody recommended me Gary Vee, right? Like, and started listening to Gary. And at some point I made this decision that was to go against my dad's best advice, right? Like you and I both have successful entrepreneurial dads that we very, very much admire. Go against my dad's best advice of like, just go be business development person at this next construction company. And instead of doing that, I decided to come to Jacksonville to join a startup. And it was the first moment where I just said, hey man, this really isn't about logical business moves. This is really about this idea that I need to understand if I'm full of shit or not, right? Like if what I believe in the world to be true is going to get out there, if I'm good enough to bring it out there. And I mentioned Gary Vee because in Gary Vee's show, the crucial advice that I got from there at that time in my life was that the people that most care about you, when you're in a moment of growth, you need to be vulnerable and you need to like, you need to go through some pain in order to grow. And the people that care about you have different priorities. They want you to be comfortable. And at that moment, I was just like, okay, well, this is my moment to just like fully, unbridledly be myself. And I've just kind of been on that journey since like early 2018.
Cool. So awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
I think like Pablo, being myself, I had to do that, being the offspring of, a broken home and having to find myself and my values and what the impact I was going to make on the world. So this has been a long time journey for me. It's never been like a podcast thing where I had to find my voice. I'm still trying to be a craftsman though, inside my show. And so I would say, I still feel like I have my training wheels on my bike. Just trying to figure it out and like trying to get better at it every day. And I will, because I know that over time, when I put my mind to something and I really work at it, I get pretty good at it. And that's the level of confidence that I have, which is why I don't like downloads and all of those things. They don't mean a whole lot to me because that's not why I'm doing the show right now. Over time, it will. But right now, it's not that important to me.
Sweet. Do you remember yours, Fonzie?
I feel like I'm still on it, like I'm still working on be fully myself, no filters. Sometimes it comes out, sometimes I get sweaty. I'm like, are they judging me, It has happened in this conversation. I'm not gonna lie. It has happened where I'm like sharing my thoughts and I'm like, after I'm done and you guys are talking, I'm like, oh, why am I a little sweaty out here,
Was like, it when you asked the question and none of us had an answer? Is that?
I mean, that definitely happened,
You're like, did I ask the question in English?
But I was like, I will bring it back.
Yeah, that's good.
But I personally think definitely when I think that contrast between the Spanish show and the English show that we did was huge. But at the same time, there's this special moment in the show that we had that I think it kind of like really helps me lean into who we are. We brought Todd Brown to the show. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a pretty big direct response marketer. And I had read his book. We brought him to the show. And at the end of the show, he was like, guys, it's like, I don't say this to everybody, but you guys are going to be big. Like, I remember him saying that.
I got big.
I was like, define big, But yeah, he was saying that, and I was like about to cry. I was literally calling this guy on the podcast Mr. Todd. Like, that's how much, how much not only respect, but how kind of like afraid of being myself I was, that I was like, oh, how you doing, Mr. Todd?
Mr. Todd.
You know? And at the end of the show, he like comes out with this compliment. I was like, wow. You know, I was like, a little bit of belief, you know, instill a little bit of belief on like who we are, how we do things. I was like, this is really cool, you know? Because like early, that was episode 40, right? Out of 440 that we have right now. Yeah. And he was saying those things. And I was like, damn, that is really cool. And, you know, I will say this as well. Doesn't mean that throughout the journey, like there has not been like a lot of self-doubt. There's been plenty of self-doubt around that journey, right? Like, should we keep doing Content Profit, right? Like when we started doing the solo episodes, I said, good idea. Yes, no. Should we keep doing the other thing, right? Like there's plenty of ups and downs. But for me personally, I feel like I'm still in that journey, you know, and it might be a side challenge from being very curious on a lot of things, because I feel like, you know, and we worked together for a little bit and you were helping us, and I feel like my attention just goes to one thing and then I'm like, and then I just go to the next thing and, you know, and I just move on, and it's challenging at times.
Notion, Monday, HubSpot, go high level.
Yeah, no, it's challenging.
Pick a platform and go.
Yeah.
You know, but one thing that is important that I was just thinking about, because I see this with CEOs that I work with. Curiosity, right, is awesome. And it's part of my business acceleration model, right? A learning organization always outperforms because they solve problems differently and faster. But in this space, I would be cautionary, right? Because curiosity could turn it into a hobby as opposed to a business tool. Both of them are fine as long as you've defined, here's what I want this tool to do for me or for my audience or whatever it might be. But I think that is important. Like, why did someone start it?
Yep.
And if you're not clear on that, it's one of the first things that I always ask with CEOs that I work with. What do you want the business to do for you? Right? Because we're going to pour our heart and soul into the business. What do you want the podcast to do for you? Because we know that we're going to have to pour our heart and soul into it and, you know, solve a problem and all of those things. But I think if you're clear on what do you want the podcast to do for you, which is why I'm not that concerned about, it hasn't blown up. That's okay. That's not what I need it to do for me right now. And that's why I'm able to be persistent and passionate and curious and hopefully helpful to me, helpful to the people who do listen to it. And I've built some great relationships with CEOs out of it. That I continue to text with and, you know, talk with from time to time. I mean, that to me is the gold in it.
Lisa, what was your moment, man?
My moment was episode 21. We brought our mentor at the time, who were paid a lot of money to be in a mastermind. And
that was a good moment, though.
It was like our first like online interview. And we needed to figure out a way to introduce him on the show.
The big intro,
And we were like, man, like, how cool would it be if we do this and we bring the music that he walks on stage with and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, but this is like very over the top. And, you know,
for a podcast.
This is great for a podcast. And what if he just leaves? And we just looked at each other and we're like.
And we had some jokes in that intro too. Like, he has
the big eyes. The big eyes. I listened to 100% of all your episodes in the first year, bro. Just for the record.
And we're like, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? He just like logs off and then we just do a solo episode, which we've been doing for 28 episodes now. So we literally wrote the intro and we start reading it and we do the live music and wow, and he's like, welcome. And he comes on and he's like, this is the best interview I've ever had in a podcast.
His eyes went from big to bigger, dude.
And,
like, whoa.
And that day I was like, we need to fully lean into that. And it was like the first real moment that I felt it in the show where it's like, it was us. It was like our thing. We crafted that. And ever since that, we're just playing around and we're okay with it. We're like, hey, you know, if we make mistakes, I mean, the other day we recorded 437, we messed up the whole intro, the bottoms were like all mixed up because there was a different machine and, you know, and it is what it is. And, you know, with Gary last episode too, we had to record at home. So at the end of the day, what's going to keep us moving forward? But guys, this has been so awesome. We need to do this regular, like once a quarter or whatever.
I think it's good.
I think it's going to be
Podcasting Townhall. I like that name.
Podcasting Townhall. Very quick, we have like a minute left as I go greet the customers that are out there. Share with Fonzie like a 30-second advice on like what would be an action point.
Give us yours before you leave.
Mine will be get started and simplify your process, right? Go back to where I said the 6 stages of the production and decide of like one way to do each one of them.
Okay.
All right, now get out of here.
Go make that money,
Take
bro.
care. I'm going to try to keep this 30 seconds. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I have like 30 things running through my head right now. I'll go with this. In software is the service that I'm in, we track something called churn rate, which is how quick someone comes in the front door, leaves the back door. And we've talked about this a lot. One of the problems in podcasting, people can get really good at marketing a show. And here's the thing, if you can attract 1 million people a day, but your content isn't good, 1 million will leave that same day. And so the advice I have is get good at it. Like Jerry, like you're doing such a good job of improving your craft as an interviewer, as a host, as someone that your audience wants to hear, so that the day comes that you're like, let's turn on the marketing machine. People aren't going to be showing up by the millions and leaving. They're going to be showing up and staying. You're going to cut back on that churn rate because you've devoted your time to the craft. A lot of people who talk to me say, Alex, what do I need to do to get more listeners? I don't say this. My first question is, do you deserve to have listeners? Mm-hmm. Have you put any time into your own craft as a host? So I tell everyone, start with that. Get really good at what you do. Hone that in really well. So people are like, man, I've got to listen to Jerry. Like, I can't not listen because he's just so good. And so that's my advice. Before you even think about growth, think about getting really good as an individual yourself.
My advice is to think of your podcast as a stage and you have an event space. Think about who you want to serve, what is interesting to them, the same way that you would if you're putting on an event for people that you were trying to do business with, and then who in your network and who out of the people that you want to serve and who is within an arm's reach that you can invite to talk about the subjects that people are interested in, and use that as a leverage point. Use it as a stage to create leverage around the people that you want to meet that will add validation to what you already believe, the people that you're trying to serve that you want to add value to from that stage, and that content as how you can share that with people without just being a one-to-one scenario. You can just share it at scale.
Yeah, mine is really simple. Same thing that I talk about in business. Define what you want the podcast to do for you. Start there, because then you won't be discouraged, or you'll know when to stop. When you haven't found your audience, when you haven't solved the problem, when you haven't found the people that are going to be interested in that. But if you can define that first, that is such a sustaining thing.
Interesting. And then for me, more than a advice, it's kind of like an overall takeaway from today's conversation. You know, in the podcasting industry, that might be decreasing from podcasters but increasing in audience, right? That is actually an interesting and exciting space to get into. Where we need to start is, why am I doing this, right? We talked about that, right? Who am I either talking to, or also who is going to help me with parts of my process? Because like you mentioned at the beginning, you might not be the marketer. And like you mentioned, well, you need to probably outsource that part, right? Or are you going to be the person that, hey, guess what? Maybe I don't have the capacity or resources to do this, so I need to learn how to do these things and dedicate to that. And then lastly, what can I do? Not only, you know, what am I doing this, but also like, what am I doing for others? Like, why are people tuning in and what are they taking away from this episode? So hopefully you guys got some good answers out of this today podcast Townhall episode. I think it was awesome. We definitely need to do this again. Maybe we'll do one with a few cocktails and stuff like that. I don't even drink cocktails, but I don't know why I said that.
This is not
some mini donuts and coffee.
I think this is gonna be the Bruce and Bros.
mini donuts.
This, you know, the mini donuts.
You can't say you don't eat or drink those.
No, we cannot say mini donuts because my girlfriend family owns Parlor Donuts, so we're gonna have to bring big Parlor Donuts in here and Parlor Coffee. Make sure you guys go on and
Sponsor
check them
easy.
out.
You know, we're talking to you.
No
Sponsor
books
the
allowed.
episode.
No books allowed.
Yeah, guys. With that said, thank you so much for tuning to the Contents Profit Podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite podcasting platform and on social media.
That is right. As all these alpha male studs help you move one step closer towards your goal. Please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Let's go.
Awesome.
awesome.
Damn.
That was epic.
That was good.
Press the
we hit
red
the-
one right there.
Do I hit the record?
Yep.